3D Dynasty podcast, and we are on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, brought to you by Shady Rays. SGPN is teaming up with Shady Rays for Shady May. Get 50% off your Shady Rays using promo code SGPN, and then go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/shady for your chance to win $500. We're also brought to you by Edge Boost. Edge Boost enables you to double your bet with no interest. Go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/edge. Get started today. We're going to talk about the AFC South, and we're going to bring in my guy, FF Bourbon Dude, and talk about all of these rookie quarterbacks. This division got 3 of the top 4 rookie quarterbacks in this year's NFL draft, and that has a huge impact on all of the pieces. We're going to recap every single team in the AFC South with a full offseason recap, draft, and free agency. And we're also going to talk about Mike Clay's projections. And as always, let's get right into it, Brad. So what team do we have up first? The Houston Texans. And so the Houston Texans, they had one of the craziest drafts with what they were able to pull off. But let's start off with their offseason. They've been very, very busy. They got tight end Andrew Beck. They got running back Mike Boone, wide receiver Noah Brown, Michael Dieter at center, Case Keenum at quarterback, Corey Littleton at linebacker, Shaq Mason at guard, EJ Perry at quarterback, the guy that cleaned up after the combine, Denzel Perriman, linebacker. They had Sheldon Rankins, kind of an underrated pick there. He was a good player for the Jets last year. Hassan Ridgeway, 2 defensive linemen, Dalton Schultz, Kendall Sheffield, Steven Sims, Devin Singletary, Jimmy Ward, Chase Winovich, Robert Woods, and they also get John Mechie back from their last year's draft class that missed all of 2022. And then out of those offseason free agent picks, anything you want to talk about, or want to straight to the draft?
I think the offensive side of the ball is obviously a big key here. I think the addition of Dalton Schultz was a really nice one. They bring in a veteran in Robert Woods, who I think can help that veteran presence really helps a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud that they have. But I can't overlook some of the defensive additions. And this is both the draft, being able to go up and get Will Anderson, and being able to turn around and add guys like Sheldon Rankins, big defensive lineman. I think Chase Winovich is kind of an underrated addition to that defense as well for the defensive line. So I really like what the team and the new coaching staff is able to do here in the offseason. You know, I think PFF gave them a pretty good grade. I've got a pretty high grade in their offseason moves as well, because they bring in not these flashy players. They didn't blow a bunch of money in free agency and sell their future, but they definitely brought in some solid pieces for sure.
Yeah, and so let's look at their draft. And so we talked about it. CJ Stroud at the number 2 spot. They really were not happy. I think they wanted Bryce Young, but Lovie Smith wasn't having it. Will Anderson at the 3 spot. I think they overpaid. And even if they had CJ Stroud at 3, because you say, okay, I'm going to take CJ Stroud to lower the price at 3. It didn't work that way. They still paid full value for that. And Will Anderson is going to have to be Myles Garrett kind of good for this to be an okay trade. They gave up the number 12 pick. They gave up pick 34. They also gave up not the Browns' first-round pick next year, their first-round pick next year, and an additional pick. So 4 players for pick 103 and a 4th-round pick. And a lot of people really were like, they just got greedy. They couldn't figure out if they wanted CJ Stroud or Will Anderson, so they got both. And they, pretty much overpaid for Will Anderson to the point where Will Anderson is going to have to be an absolute stud. He's probably a no-miss good player. I think he's going to be a very good player. But you look at a team that had a whole lot of picks, and they could have did what the Jets did and just pick a lot of good players, and they went and just got one, good player with that extra pick. I mean, they had a lot of draft capital. They walked away with C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, Juice Scruggs, who a lot of people thought was a reach in the second round, Tank Dell. They got Dylan Horton. They got Henry Tuoto, Jarrett Patterson. He's a guard and center from Notre Dame. Xavier Hutchinson, wide receiver from Iowa State. Then Brandon Hill, who is a safety. And so thoughts there about the, C.J. Stroud, Tank Dell, Xavier Hutchinson.
I think you love they got their franchise quarterback in CJ Stroud. We're not going to spend a bunch of time on that. I actually really like a couple additions from the 5th and the 6th round. And if you think about DeMeco Ryans made his cake with just racking up the tackles. This dude was a sideline to sideline linebacker. That is what he did. He was that middle linebacker of old. And I'm telling you, this 5th round pick in Henry Tuoto, I think is a sneaky good pick. This dude is going to be a tackle machine for the Houston Texans defense. And I think being able to be coached up by one of the best in Houston Texans history from a middle linebacker perspective is a really nice addition in the 5th round. He was one of my favorite middle linebackers in the draft, and to see him go this late, I was a little surprised. I thought he'd come off the board earlier, but I'm telling you, that Alabama connection, that middle linebacker to middle linebacker connection, I really like. And then that 6th round pick that you mentioned right there at the end in Xavier Hutchinson, I think can be that really good addition to what they were kind of hoping Nico Collins would be, right? Nico Collins not really coming to fruition. They've got Robert Woods. They've got John Mechie. They've got some of these smaller guys. But if they can come in and turn Xavier Hutchinson into that 100-plus catch guy that he was at Iowa State, I think you might find yourself with a sneaky PPR upside when paired with a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud.
Well, I'm going to tell you about my thoughts on this, but first I'm going to talk about Edge Boost. SGPN is excited to announce an exclusively early access partnership with Edge Boost, the world's first bet now, pay later Visa card. Similar to buy now, pay later programs like Affirm and Afterpay, Edge Boost enables you to double your bet with no interest and pay back the advance over 4 equal weekly installment payments. That's right, 0% interest. Simply deposit funds into your account with an Edge Boost will match the deposit, so you can use 2 times the funds on any legal sports betting site. Edge currently offers up to a $2,500 advance as you build a repayment history. My Edge Boost double down play of the day is we're going to talk about basketball, right? We're going to talk about Steph Curry. And Steph Curry, he's going to hit the over on his point total tonight, and that's my play of the day. Go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/edge to sign up today. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/edge. Must be 21 or older and play in a state where only valid in legal states. Program problem gambling called 1-800-GAMBLER. Let's talk more about this Houston Texans, and let's go into Mike Clay's projections here. CJ Stroud, he's got him projected for 15 games, probably going to play all 17 as long as he's healthy, but maybe Davis Mills goes out there and gives them a reason to put CJ Stroud in pretty early. This team, again, they do not have their own first-round pick next year, but they have him projected for 3,348 yards, 17 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 41 sacks, and they got him for 128 yards on the ground and 1 touchdown. QB 28, nothing crazy. You look at the backfield, they have Dameon Pierce is definitely the leader in the backfield, but Devin Singletary is getting his touches, and you see a pretty decent split, 202 fantasy points 131. Damian Pierce is one of the winners from free agency. They have him as RB21 in PPR settings. Let's just go there. Quarterback and running backs. Are there any trade targets here or any sleepers, Brad?
No, I think you kind of know what you're getting in Damian Pierce, right? You know he's that first and second down bruiser. He's not going to really bring a lot in the receiving game, even though they really have him around 40 catches, which kind of caught me off guard a little bit when I first saw the projections. I just don't see that. I think they're going to use Dare Ogunbowale a little bit in the pass catching game, a little more than what I thought they had projected here with Mike Boone and Troy Hairston in there. And then Devin Singletary, I think, will be that kind of mix in back with Damian Pierce from a carries perspective, which is what you kind of see. So I don't think there's a sleeper in that running back room. The quarterback room, there's no sleeper there. It's CJ Stroud or bust. The one thing that kind of jumped out to me about the projections here is CJ Stroud has been very good at protecting the ball in his college career, and here we see 14 interceptions. I realize it's a totally different game. We saw Trevor Lawrence throw an astronomical amount of interceptions 2 years ago in his rookie season, but I just feel like with the receiving room that he has, the Robert Woods, if he's able to get open like he used to, Noah Brown would be a little bit of a sleeper, which maybe we'll get there when we talk about the wide receivers, but I think that core will give CJ Stroud a little bit more opportunity to make some of those easier throws where he's not going to have to push the ball down the field all the time.
Yeah, and as you can see in your redraft leagues, you're not going to want to touch CJ Stroud. And really the conversation you got to have in your drafts is, do I take CJ Stroud, Jahmyr Gibbs, or JSN at the 104, 105 spot? Because Bryce Young is typically going at the 103 after Bijan and Anthony Richardson. And at the 104, you're really looking at Gibbs, JSN, or CJ Stroud. And if you're, in super flex leagues, that's going to be your dilemma. And again, it may not hit year one. Devin Singletary might be a little bit of a sleeper here because there's no depth behind him. And if Pierce were to go down, Singletary would have a pretty easy path for a lot of touches. And they haven't scheduled for quite a bit of touches as it is. But let's go to the receivers. And the top receiver is actually Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz is scheduled. He's projected to get 56 receptions. Nico Collins, 50. Robert Woods, 55. John Mechie, 44. Pretty evenly spread out. And so somebody obviously could emerge a little different here. But, Brad, what are your thoughts here about Nico Collins being the number one target from the receiver position? Is he someone you're looking to acquire?
It seems like a little bit of a reach to me. I just think they brought in Tank Dell. They draft, and now I know it's a different regime that didn't draft John Mechie, but another Alabama guy. Noah Brown is the guy that I think is the sleeper out of this group. I just don't see Nico Collins taking that step to be a damn near 100 target guy. And maybe I'm crazy. Maybe he was close to that this past year. I don't think he was, but maybe. And if that's the case, then maybe he is a buy, but I'm not buying him right now. I'm really probably staying away from any of these guys outside of John Mechie. If I can get him at a still decent price, I think he's going to end up being the most explosive player out of the bunch, can give you those big splash plays with CJ Stroud and that big arm that he's got. So out of the wide receiver room, if I'm targeting anybody, it's going to be John Mechie, definitely not Nico Collins.
Yeah, and Tank Dell, it was interesting. CJ Stroud requested them to get him, and he did. It's almost like the NBA now. Like these players are asking for it, and you're getting it. I'd be a little careful with that. Patrick Mahomes, he asked for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and he got it. They're players. They're not scouts. And, Dell is someone who is uncoverable at the Senior Bowl, and I think he is going to be a good NFL player, but with his size, it's just, we don't know if he's going to be able to hold up and be a consistent fantasy producer. But I do like the call of Noah Brown being a little bit of a sleeper here. All these guys should be at a relatively good cost. And I mean all of them, because the Houston Texans are one of the worst teams in the league. And Dalton Schultz right there, tight end is such a wasteland. You're not going to get Dalton Schultz and expect him to be Dalton Schultz of Dallas Cowboys, where he's getting, 8-9 touchdowns. But I think in your PPR leagues, he's going to be a good option. They're going to have to pass the ball. They're going to be trailing quite a bit. And this is going to be a San Francisco type of an offense. And so you're going to see CJ Stroud getting the ball out quick. And I do like the fit for him. They really, I like the fits for all the rookie quarterbacks, really. And with him going there in that offense, he is someone that can deal. He's your prototypical, point guard kind of, quarterback where he's just going to be back there and dealing it. And if Jimmy Garoppolo can look good in that offense, CJ Stroud can definitely look good in that offense. But let's not pretend Kyle Shanahan is not calling the plays. It's going to be someone different, but they're going to try to implement that offense. And CJ Stroud getting the ball out quick to guys like Tank Dell and Robert Woods and John Mechie it's gonna be really, really good for his confidence early if he can do that, and it will help the offensive line, which has actually gotten a lot better. But let's move on to the next team.
All right, let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts. Indianapolis Colts.
The Colts, they definitely made a splash, and a lot of people are really excited about the Colts. And their offseason free agency was a little boring. They got Pharaoh Brown at receiver, Taven Bryan, defensive lineman, former first-round pick. They got Samson Abukum, edge, and then Darrington Evans. They got Matt Gay, the punter, then Isaiah McKenzie at receiver from Buffalo, and then Gardner Minshew at quarterback. Gardner Minshew in Indiana. I'm in Indiana. I need to go grab a beer with Gardner. Anthony Richardson leads the class. This is the most athletic draft class that has ever been drafted. Their average RAS score was 9.4. They did not have a single guy under 9.0. Anthony Richardson, literally the most athletic quarterback to ever put up production. They put up numbers at the combine. Julius Brents, he's the Anthony Richardson at the cornerback position. He's very raw, but he has absolute bonker numbers from the workout perspective. Josh Downs, they graded him as elite from PFF. This is one of the fastest guys in the class, and he gets to play in the AFC South. Everyone knows that the Colts Stadium is one of the fastest turfs in the league, and Downs is going to be playing on it. Blake Freeland, absolute freak as far as the numbers for a tackle. He goes to them. Then they got, I'm not going to say it, it's Adi Odubuware out of Northwestern. I think I nailed it. He was he's kind of a tweener. He was poor man's Cansey, and they were talking about him possibly sneaking into the back end of the first round. They got him in the 4th round. Then Darius Rush. A lot of people talked about when they put on the South Carolina tape to look at the other corner, they were like, Rush stands out. He's got some flashes. He's also got some plays where Tank Dell and some other guys really toasted him at the Senior Bowl, but he's also a guy that has some really, really bright plays as well. So he's going to have to be more consistent, but they're going to try to coach that out of him, and they got him in the 5th round. Daniel Scott, safety, another guy. Will Mallory, and we're going to talk about him. He's one of my favorite picks. I think he is the best fantasy tight end on this roster. And then you have Evan Hull, the guy that ran every single one of his reps back to the end zone. And then we had Titus Leo, edge. Then we have Jalen Jones and Jake Witt. So that recaps their huge draft, huge offseason. Before that, Brad, I think we got another sponsor we want to talk to you guys about, and that's our friends over at Shady Rays.
It's Shady Rays, and hey, look, it's May, and we like to crown that as Shady May, and we are teaming up with Shady Rays not only to get you an amazing 50, that's right, mark it, 50% off, but you can also have a chance to win $500. Shady Rays has you covered from the sun to the slopes with premium polarized shades, customizable snow goggles, and much more. Shady Rays has durable frames and extremely clear optics for outdoor adventures. But that's not all. Shady Rays offers the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every single pair of sunglasses that you purchase from Shady Rays is backed by not only broken, but also lost replacements. So if you lose or break your pair, even on day one, they told us they're going to send you a brand new pair, 0 questions asked. So wear your Shady Rays with confidence because they have your back long after you purchase. For our international listeners, Shady Rays also has you covered as well with shipping from Canada to Australia to New Zealand and even the UK. So go to shadyrays.com and use our promo code SGPN for 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses. Then take your receipt to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/shady for your chance to win the $500 Shady Make contest.
And what you see on the board here is Mike Clay's projections. These are not our projections. And starting off, they got Anthony Richardson also playing 15 games. These numbers will obviously be higher if he's able to stay healthy for all 17 and starts week 1. And it's looking like he is going to start week 1. They said they're going to live through the dark times, and that means they're going to start him early or at least for a good majority of this season. And they have him throwing the ball quite a bit, almost 450 times there. He's got 16 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, and only 2,889 yards. Very similar to CJ Stroud, except for the yardage is a little bit down. But the rushing is up, 609 yards on the ground with 5 touchdowns, putting him as the QB 21 as a rookie in 15 games. That's pretty good. And in your super flex leagues, you might be able to start him. But in redraft, in one quarterback leagues, he's not someone that you're going to want to go with. Gardner Minshew's still there, and we'll see how long Gardner plays. Anthony Richardson, we talked about it last week. You can go. He's going to be the second quarterback gone in your leagues. And if you don't want Anthony Richardson, then you can trade back, and you can get quite a bit for him. If you were to trade back from him to get CJ Stroud at the 105 spot, because Stroud's usually going 105 or 106 if Gibbs gets in there, you could get CJ Stroud plus a 2024 second plus Drake London, according to Brad's his data last week that he was looking at. So Anthony Richardson, everyone's excited. Brad, I know we talked about him quite a bit. Your thoughts here? Have you seen any recent trades on Anthony Richardson? What are your thoughts about Gardner Minshew?
I haven't, because it's a lot of the Pitts situation from a couple years ago. People drafted Kyle Pitts in the first round and then immediately turned around and said, I need 3 firsts for him. Well, nobody's going to pay that because it's asinine. And I think the same situation is here with Anthony Richardson. For those folks that moved up in the draft or took him at 102, the asking price is entirely too high right now. If you can get it, you better take it. It baffles me, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here. This dude, can you honestly tell me that in a rookie season with CJ Stroud, he can have basically the exact same touchdown to interception ratio as CJ Stroud? Get out of here with that. This dude is not half the quarterback at throwing the ball as CJ Stroud. From an athletic perspective, he destroys CJ Stroud. I get that. He's got the legs. He's going to have the yardage rushing. He's going to have the touchdowns rushing. But to say he's going to have the same number of passing touchdowns and interceptions as CJ Stroud is just nonsense to me.
I know
I've got serious shade on him right now. I get it.
I know Brad loves talking Anthony Richardson, and we want to try to keep this a little short. I will talk about Anthony Richardson, and they did say, he's obviously everyone looks good in camp, but he looks good in camp, and there's a lot of people, Josh Norris and others, talking about how inexperienced he is, and I'm going to go through some stats. So he's only started 14 games, and in those 14 games, he's had 2,729 yards, very similar to what we're seeing on the board here. 15 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, very similar to what's on the board. 570 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. Very similar to what you're seeing on the board. And I sent this tweet out a month ago. This is all just numbers that are like his numbers, legit numbers. So, as far as what you're seeing, you've seen him do in college, Anthony Richardson, he just hasn't thrown the ball a lot, and he's actually faced some tougher competition than some of the other guys, but he hasn't thrown the ball a lot. You don't really have a lot on him, but Shane Steichen, we'll see if he's able to coach it out of him. Let's go to the running backs. You have Jonathan Taylor. They really did not add a lot to this running back room. Evan Hull is there. Evan Hull is not the most dynamic running back. You have Deion Jackson, who a lot of people really, they got to use him a couple games last year, and he looked pretty good. And so Deion Jackson's there. Is that someone you're interested in, or Zach Moss here, Brad?
The only way I am interested in these guys is if I have Jonathan Taylor. Like, I would want to handcuff him with Deion Jackson. I think we saw enough from Deion Jackson to see that he can be a serviceable and startable running back with Jonathan Taylor out of the situation. If he ends up injured again, knock on wood, we don't want that. But I think that's where you really kind of land is these guys are only interesting if Jonathan Taylor gets hurt. Look, he's being projected for 300 carries. There's nothing left for anybody else.
And this is a dynasty podcast, and a lot of rosters are pretty deep. So you don't got a lot of things to choose from on the free agent market. But you might see a guy like Zach Moss on free agency, or Evan Hull in the fourth round. And if you have Jonathan Taylor, it's a good to handcuff him. And you could see one of these guys as a stash. What I was looking for earlier was Anthony Richardson's history of attempts: 215 completions out of 353 attempts, only 215 completions versus 161 rushing attempts. Passing depth in 12 starts behind the line of scrimmage, 45 for 56. Passes attempted under 10 yards, 51 for 88. Passes attempted 10 plus yards, 53 out of 87. So 87 of his passes were 10 plus, 64 of his passes were 20 plus. So I will say this, he throws the ball deep a lot more. And so you see a lot of these guys with, 78% completion percentage, Jake Hainers and stuff. And like 90% of their passes are, like 10 yards down the field or behind line of scrimmage, Derek Carr kind of, production. He does throw the ball down the field quite a bit, but you're looking at 215 completions versus 161 rushing attempts. This guy has not played a lot of football yet, and he's got to learn the between the ears part. Reading defenses and stuff is going to be the big thing. Out of the receivers, Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs. This is a pretty decent wide receiver room. And you see Michael Pittman leading the charge with 75 receptions, 825 yards, 4 touchdowns, wide receiver 35. If you have Michael Pittman on your team right now, how are you feeling?
I think you have to hold him because I think a lot, people are going to use, the shade that for instance, if I'm the Michael Pittman owner, people are going to come to me and say, well, you don't like Anthony Richardson.
Michael Pittman right here. Just holding him.
I'm holding him. I'm going to coddle him a little bit. I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to wait. I'm going to hope that Anthony Richardson does have it between the ears. Look, I don't want him to not be good. I just need to see it before I'm willing to pay that price.
Just hate
him. If I'm the Pittman owner, I want to see that, right? And right now, people are going to want to get him on a discount because of, Anthony Richardson, he needs to grow as a quarterback and blah, 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 the narrative there. But they're hoping the same thing that I'm hoping. Hey, if Anthony Richard comes in and lights the world on fire because he does have that big arm and can throw it downfield, that's going to be really nice for Michael Pittman. So I think he's a hold right now. I don't think you can sell him. But if you find somebody who's willing to sell him for a good price, then you buy him.
He might be a buy.
That it's going to be easy to do right now.
He might be a buy right now, but I will say there's a lot of love for Michael Pittman on the Twitter streets. And so someone said that he was a buy.
With a grain of salt.
Someone said he was a buy, and I was like, I don't get it. Like, who's buying Michael Pittman right now? And he was like, well, and I was like, maybe for like a mid-second, early second. Then I put a dynasty price check out there, and he's worth like 108. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'm selling Michael Pittman. He was right. Shout out Slapdog. So
was that before they took Richardson?
It was before Richardson, but it was also kind of baked in that they were going to get Richardson or Levis.
Was it already?
And so, which Levis would have probably brought the same kind of concerns. And so, and I do like the other pieces. Alec Pierce and Josh Downs are good receivers, and Downs has fallen quite a bit in the in the draft, and he's become a little bit of a value. And Alec Pierce, he was a good receiver last year, garnered a lot of targets. I think he is a kind of a sneaky buy. You might be able to get him for a 3rd round pick right now. Shout out earlier, he said he's got the legs. Shout out ZZ Top. And so we need to get some sound bites in here. And then you got the tight ends. I don't want to spend too much time on tight ends. They have Jelani Woods as the top guy. He's not going to be a weekly starter. I don't like any of these tight ends. I would take a shot in, 4-10, 4-11, 4-12 or an UDFA. Will Mallory is a super athletic tight end. He is a move tight end. He's not going to do much blocking, but blocking does not get you fantasy points. I get it. These guys got on the field, but this guy, he's a real deal pass catcher, and he gives them an additional threat in that defense. He can catch the ball down the field. He can definitely move when he gets the ball in his hands, and he can create some separation. So I think he's more than just a seam threat. And some of these other guys, they're just like big basketball players that can catch the occasional touchdown, and they can do a seam threat every once in a while. But Will Mallory, if he were to develop, he would have the highest ceiling of this group. So let's move on to the next team so we can get out of here soon.
All right, we're going to move on to Jacksonville Jaguars.
And the Jags, they're the cream of the crop when it comes to the division these days. They had only a few draft picks. They had Chandler, offseason moves. Chandler Brewer, guard. Michael, it's like Dogecoin. Dagba, defensive lineman. Dearness Johnson went over there. Henry Mondo, and then they have, it's not Mondo. Josh Wells, a tackle. And so pretty quiet offseason there. And then right on draft day, they found out that their left tackle, Cam Robinson, is going to have a suspension, which totally threw off their draft plans. I am sure that they had to move things around when they got this news. And so he's going to miss, I think, 6 games this year. And so their first pick was Anton Harrison, who could have been their pick. But they have Walker Little on the other side. They seem to like him. Former 2nd-round pick out of Stanford. Played pretty well. Cam Robinson just got signed, and they just got Josh Wells. But now this guy could start. He could be the left tackle to start the season for the Jaguars. Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. This was probably the strangest pick of the draft. Brenton Strange at the in the 2nd round.
Pun intended.
Yes, very much. And I like him, but I just didn't really get that. And so maybe they're not planning on Evan Ingram being there a long time. And I'm a big draft capital guy, but you need to have some of your exceptions in there. Tutu Atwell was a 2nd rounder. Andy Isabella was a 2nd rounder. Drew Sample was a 2nd rounder. Josh DeGora, or whatever his name is over there for the Green Bay Packers, was a 2nd or 3rd rounder. Brenton Strange, he's a fun player. He's kind of a, use check kind of a guy. He can be used as tight end, used out of the backfield. Does a lot of things. I think he brings an element to this offense, but I don't see him as taking Evan Ingram's job anytime soon. And I don't know if he'll be the replacement if Evan Ingram were to move on. Tank Bigsby, that's the most interesting one. We'll get into that. Vontrell Miller, Tyler Lacey, Yasir Abdullah from Louisville, Antonio Johnson. He's kind of a nickel, but he plays safety, plays nickel. He fell in the draft because it's kind of people don't really know where to put him. Parker Washington. They got Christian Braswell, Eric Hallett, Cooper Hodges, Raymond Voschek, and Derek Parrish, edge. And so this is a team that is obviously the top contender for the AFC South. If you got money throw it on the AFC South champs here to repeat. Unless something catastrophic happens here, they're gonna bring this back because you're looking at probably 3 rookie quarterbacks against Trevor Lawrence, and I will take the blonde bombshell. So Trevor Lawrence, they got him for just under 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns. They got him 300 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, 282 for a QB 11 finish. I think that's pretty modest. I think with all the weapons that he's going to be better than that. And then you got Travis Etienne, JaMychal Hasty, and Tank Bigsby in the backfield. So Trevor Lawrence, I mean, how high do you got him in your dynasty quarterback rankings? 5, 6?
Number 5 for me.
Yeah, I got him.
I am very high, specifically this season around Trevor Lawrence, and it would not surprise me if this dude ends up having a just monster season this year. I just have this gut feeling that he takes another step, adding somebody as dynamic as Calvin Ridley in the passing game. Bringing in Tank Bigsby, I think really helps Travis Etienne be efficient for the entire year instead of 2-3 game stretches. I think he's going to absolutely dominate. The fact this is another, I get it. Their projections. They're adding Calvin Ridley. Trevor Lawrence is in another year with all the same coaching staff, and yet he's going to have less yards and less touchdowns than he had, and more interceptions than he had last year.
Yeah,
I don't buy that at all.
I don't buy it. And yes, of course, there's 16 games instead of 17 on here. Maybe they take a rest because the AFC South is in the bag. But I definitely think he pops over the 4,000. I think he gets closer to 4,500 in that range. And, the rushing's pretty moderate here. Could rush a little bit more. But that passing, I think 4,530 would be where I'm at with him. Travis Etienne, they got him projected for 1,000-yard rushing season with 7 touchdowns, 40 receptions, 325 yards with 2 touchdowns in the air. So he's got 9 touchdowns total with a RB10 finish. Etienne's lost a little bit of steam with the addition of Tank Bigsby. There's some love out there for Tank Bigsby on the dynasty streets, and there's a little bit of hate towards Travis Etienne. I had a guy comment. I had a thread that went pretty wild because people were arguing about James Conner and other stuff. But Travis Etienne, someone was like, "Well, Travis Etienne's made of glass," and someone said, "Like what?" He said he's missed half the games he's played. Well, I mean, he missed an entire season. He's only been in the league for 2 years. He played every single game last year, dude. And so he's like, well, let me rephrase. I'm still stand by what I said, but Bigsby or Etienne has a foot injury that has a high chance of re-injury, which is true. And Bigsby's, a better running back. And I was like, well, the NFL says differently. But Bigsby is a good running back, and I don't agree with Hasty's projections over Bigsby. I think he'll get more work. I do think he's a good running back, and I think he got decent enough draft capital, and it'll help Etienne. You heard Mark Ingram talk about how his career has been extended by being in a dual system. Travis Etienne isn't built for, 25 carries a game. There's no running backs except for like Saquon Barkley and Najee Harris that are getting 25 carries a game. I mean, it doesn't happen that often that running backs get that much. And people with the expectations that their running back is going to get all of the touches, it's just like that's a thing of the past. Etienne with 239 rushing and 40 receptions, that's 280 touches. That's a lot. If he were to get that, that's right around 17, 18 touches a game. That would be fantastic for Etienne managers, but I do think that, Bigsby gets the majority and not Hasty. Let's go to the receivers before we get to the next team. Calvin Ridley comes in as the number 1 target, just by 1 target. Him and Christian Kirk basically share the duties here and have almost the exact same stats, finishing as wide receiver 31 and 33. Thoughts here? If I could say, Brad, you're on the clock. Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk are on the board. Are you taking either one of them? And if there's one that you prefer?
I just think the upside is there with Ridley, right? I get it. He's been out for a couple years, and that's likely why he's around the same ADP as Christian Kirk is, right? I think there's a lot of people that are, he's been out of the game for 2 years. He's 28 going on 29. We're not touching that. And others that are, and it's kind of splitting down the middle. But I think Calvin Ridley just provides the most upside. We know how good he is. We know how good he was, and we just hope translating that from Matt, what he was able to do with a really good quarterback in Matt Ryan in Atlanta to a really good quarterback in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. And I think he's going to come back with something to prove. So, as long as he's able to stay healthy, I think you're really looking at a pretty solid season here. And these are pretty modest numbers. I think it's fair to project something like that. But it would also not surprise me if, with him being the alpha and him with the route running capabilities that he has, to be 11 or 1,200 yard wide receiver with close to 8 or 9 touchdowns. Because again, I just think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a monster season, and part of that is because of the addition of Calvin Ridley.
Any thoughts about Zay Jones? I mean, you're going to have him as a deep play. You could probably get him. If you're a contending team, you got a bunch of flex plays. Would you take him for, let's say I offered you 306 and you can have Zay Jones?
I mean, I get it, and I'd take him as a throw-in. I wouldn't expect anything, and part of this is because I don't know that he's going to end up with that much work. He is going to be the deep threat in that offense. I get that, but I've got a love in my heart for Parker Washington, and I think some of that work is going to end up with Parker Washington and that underneath kind of, let's run a drag route or a slant route and get the ball in Parker Washington's hands and see if we can kind of do something with it. And I think I just think there's going to be so much of a focus on Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk down the field that Zay Jones is going to kind of be the odd man out of the three. So yes, as a throw in, but he's not somebody I'm targeting or anything like that.
Yeah, I think Zay Jones this year, but I think they will move on for him because he's expensive. I know we will differ a little bit on Parker Washington. I do think he's a good player, but I think it might take a year. Zay Jones was very, very popular. He was a targeted player, trusted player in the offense. He knows the offense. Parker Washington's going to have to do a lot to take his reps in this offseason, or of course, an injury or something like that happens. Then you have the tight end position. Again, you have Brenton Strange there, who's a little bit of a possible replacement for Evan Ingram in the future. But this year they have Evan Ingram going for 60 receptions, 657 yards, 4 touchdowns, tight end 7 in PPR formats, playing 15 games. Is Evan Ingram someone you're targeting, if you can't get one of those top tight ends?
I think so. I think he can be another one of those kind of not bargain basement, but he's going to be cheaper and he's going to give you a really good year of production. And I think that's what you need to be a championship squad, is a productive tight end. If you have that, it gives you a leg up above the competition. And I think this is another one. I think these are modest numbers. I feel like Calvin Ridley and Evan Ingram, when I look at these numbers, are the two outliers that I believe to have better seasons than what the statistics have in here. And that's because I think there's another year of growth in Trevor Lawrence. So when I look at this, I'm hoping that Evan Ingram is up over that 100 target range and is able to eclipse 800 yards and, 6 touchdowns or something like that, and put him in one of that, be in contention for a top 5 tight end by the end of the 2023 season.
All right. Well, I think it's time to move on to the Titans.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Well, the Titans, they had a pretty interesting offseason, obviously, with the draft itself. You had Will Levis. But before that, this offseason was all about rebuilding. And they have a new front office. And there was rumors about Derrick Henry being traded out. They got, Ryan Tannehill was reportedly on the block. They got rid of some big contracts, let Bud Dupree leave. They did sign Jeffrey Simmons, but everything else was about changing over that roster. They signed Azeez El-Shahir. He was from the Niners, linebacker. Daniel Brunskill, guard/center from the Niners. Andre Dillard got a pretty big contract. He was a former first-round pick. Eagles let him go. We'll see. He was very highly touted by Daniel Jeremiah and a few others, but he ended up, not playing much because they had a pretty loaded roster. And so he got a decent contract. He could end up starting at left tackle for them. Luke Gifford, linebacker. Arden Key, edge. He's flashed at times. Chris Moore, receiver. They got Sean Murphy Bunting, corner from Tampa. Ben Neiman, linebacker. And then Trevon Wesco. And then the draft came. The Titans reportedly were trying to trade up to the number 3 spot. They were not willing to give up more than the Texans. And as soon as CJ Stroud was drafted, they dropped out of the race. And so they ended up going with Peter Skoronski instead of Will Levis in the first round. They passed on him. Then they tried to trade up, apparently, and at the end of the first round, possibly for Will Levis. They did not. And then they did trade up in the second round, and they took Will Levis, who did not have to wait long day 2, but had another one of those infamous green room situations where he sat, waited until day 2. They got Tyjae Spears, which was a really interesting pick. They did not have a lot of draft capital. Running back is not a huge need for this team, at least this year. And the reports are about his knee. This could be a very short career for him. And he got round 3 draft capital, which was pretty interesting. Then they got Josh Wiley, pretty good tight end out of Cincinnati, fast. Won't be the starter, but can add something to that offense. Who does run quite a bit of 12 personnel. Then they have Jalen Duncan. That was a good pick in my book. A lot of PFF and others had him ranked as one of the top day 2 tight ends, and they got him in day 3. And then Colton Dowell, receiver. I wish they would have drafted, more receivers here, whether it's for Tannehill or Levis. This is one of the worst receiving cores in the entire league by a long shot, in my opinion. And so let's start out. We have Ryan Tannehill projected to play almost all the games. Will Levis only projected for 3 games. That stands out to me. Is Ryan Tannehill in your Superflex leagues someone that you're buying low on?
No, I don't think I'm buying low, mainly because I don't expect him to last past this year, even if he is able to make it through the bye, which I think there's a world where the Titans are a 1 or 2 win team going into their week 7 bye, which I know, is not, it's before the halfway point of the season, but they don't have an easy schedule before the bye. And we've talked about this before. That's where they could make the swap. But if he is able to make it through that, his contract is at a situation, and it's pretty clear they're ready to move on. They were trying to move up and get CJ Stroud. They ended up trying to trade back into the back end of the first to get Will Levis. Ended up taking him in the second by trading up where they needed to get him. And I just think the writing's on the wall for Tannehill. Now, if I need a QB3 in a super flex league and I am a contender, I am willing to go see what the price is for a Ryan Tannehill, because there's also a very high likelihood that he ends up playing the whole season, right? Because we're looking at the fact of the matter is we're looking at a second round quarterback in Will Levis. And Ryan Tannehill, we've known and seen, pretty good things from him in the Tennessee offense outside of last year, which was just a really down year. They've really kind of lost their entire receiving core since he's been there. And now you got a second-year player in Treylon Burks that you kind of hope comes up and is able to take that next step for him. I just don't know that it's going to happen.
Yeah, I do think, this is a team that's not really playing for anything this year. We'll see. Their coach somehow gets them to win. If everybody's hurt and Brad's the quarterback, they'll still pick up a W. But I I just don't see it happening this year for them. And if they're halfway through the season, I want to see when their bye week is, because that's where you could probably see Will Levis come in. Ryan Tannehill, he goes on ice. They can try to move him at the trade deadline or in the offseason if somebody has an injury or an interest in him. But yeah, I'm not interested. It's such a bad offense and a bad team. Offensive lines being turned over. They haven't really addressed the center position. This is a rough team, and I think they're going to be one of the worst in the league. Probably picking in the top 3 or 4 next year, which would be interesting because you have Will Levis with second round draft capital and Drake May, Caleb Williams, and some others on the board. Thoughts here on Tyjae Spears? He was one of the Twitter darlings this offseason, and now he's really a big question mark. If Derrick Henry got traded or got hurt, Tyjae Spears could be an absolute baller this year, but he's also got the knee injury and behind Derrick Henry currently.
I just think the draft capital, and by draft capital, I mean like where you get him in your rookie drafts is worth the shot right now. I mean, you're getting him. I saw him go in the early third. He went at the 301. You're telling me I can get a third round running back who is the backup to a 28-year-old, 29-year-old like bruiser. Like this dude wants to hit people. I realize it's Derrick Henry, but we started to see some injuries creep up on him. And I think Tyjae Spears is an absolute buy right now in your rookie drafts. If you can get him in the back end of the second or the early third, it just makes sense to me. I think he's got the skill set to do it. It looks like he's put on a little bit of weight as well from what I read last. And look, I get it. Every player is going to say this, but every time he is asked about it, he just says, I'm healthy. I'm healthy. I'm ready. I'm healthy. And I get it. I understand from a medical perspective what physicians are saying. The simple fact of the matter is this dude came back from those ACL injuries and had a huge season for the Green Wave last year. So if he's able to do that, hey, I might ride that Green Wave for a little while, especially at the price of the 301.
At 301, I'll take him. Todd Gurley said he was healthy. Jay Ajayi said he's healthy. I mean,
yeah,
those players are going to say they're healthy. J.K. Dobbins said he was healthy last year.
That's what I'm saying. Yep, I get it.
And so, but I do think, he could be the starter in 2 years. The draft capital really states that. And so if you get him as the starting running back for the Tennessee Titans in 2024, 25, 26, and that's it, it might be worth it, especially at 301. 201, I'm out. 301, I'm in.
Yep.
Wide receiver, gross. I'm not interested in anybody. I've never been a Treylon Burks guy, but I'm not interested in anybody. If you are a rebuilding team, maybe Treylon Burks is someone you're interested in because you can probably get him fairly cheap right now. Someone that people might have spent 106, 107 on him last year, and now we can get him for maybe a early second. But I mean, I'm personally not very interested. They have him going wide receiver 37, almost a wide receiver 3. Brad, I mean, he's the only show in town, 100 targets. It's worth something.
Yeah. So that's part. I got a couple questions for you. Number one, I had to make a drop decision in a league, and would you ever think that a drop candidate would be the wide receiver 2 of any NFL football team?
No.
I dropped Nick Westbrook-Akine yesterday. Like, am I crazy? Like, I mean, I just don't see the volume there for him. This is a run-first team. I get it. He's going to catch some passes, but it's not something I want to even try to mess with in a dynasty roster.
Mean, at the end of the day, he's wide receiver 80 is when it's going to end up as, and he'll have maybe one random week throughout the season you could actually have played him. But like, he's a guy you play like, lineup roulette with. maybe in a very deep best ball or something, but I'm just not interested at all in anybody but Treylon Burks. And Treylon Burks has really got to be the price.
And that's my last question is Treylon Burks. So I've got a league. I'm looking at doing a little bit of rebuild. I got DeAndre Hopkins. The guy who has Burks is kind of like I'd say like middle of the road. He's probably the number 5, number 6 team. He's likely going to squeeze into the playoffs. If you were that player and you're like, you know what, if I could get one more piece, I could probably be somewhat of a contender or at least a legitimate type. Would you take DeAndre Hopkins and give up Treylon Burks?
If I'm a contender?
Yep.
I mean, maybe.
Because that's what I'm thinking about trying and seeing if I can pull it off.
I think you could probably get DeAndre Hopkins plus. I mean, he's a little older. I mean, Burks has got this situation. I mean, I as much as I don't like Treylon Burks, I feel like you're giving up value by doing it. I'm okay with doing it if you're gonna win the championship, because at the end of the day, it's about winning chips and not all. But like, you're giving up some value because Treylon Burks is still a very young receiver and a first-round draft capital guy, and he's the number 1 on his team. And DeAndre Hopkins is going to be number 1 on the worst team in football. We talked about some bad teams today, but the Cardinals are probably worse than the Texans and the Titans. And then you got, this DeAndre Hopkins could be out of the league in a year or two. And Treylon Burks is, 21, 22 years old. So I'll take the Burks side as far as the long term. I would look for another option. Last one is the tight end. We got Chig Okonkwo. I just traded him in one of our leagues. I know there's some love on the streets for Chig. He showed a little bit of something last year. I'm not as big on Chig. I do like him, but I don't know if there's necessarily upside. But I think he is the number 2 receiver, and Mike Clay agrees on this offense. So in a world where tight ends are really hard to find, he's a decent one, but they have him at tight end 17. So he's not even going to be a tight end 1, according to Mike Clay. Are you buying in on Chig? Because I sold him for what, 2-0? No, yeah. A third. I traded him for a third. I think it was like I traded him for Cedric Tillman. I traded Chig so I could draft Cedric Tillman in front of Brad.
You probably did that just so I couldn't have Cedric Tillman, most likely.
I offered you Chig in all fairness.
No, I think that's a good trade. I do like Chig also. I do think there's something there. You're going to have to wait a year, though. And anytime you think that's the case, if the savvy dynasty owner is just going to wait to buy him in season when he's even cheaper, right? So I think that's the kind of play here. I do believe that Chig is going to be good and is going to be able to provide some value later on. But I'm not buying him right now. I'm going to buy him in season when the Titans are just in the dirt and nobody's worth anything and nobody wants them on their team. That's what I'm going to buy.
Yeah. And you could. And you saw the comments were kind of back and forth. Somebody was like, man, I wish I could get Chig for a third. And the other person's like, the Titans are dog crap. Like, I'm not interested in buying any of those guys. So it's out there, and some people wouldn't offer me anything, and apparently some people thought that 303 was a steal. So, but that's the AFC South, and I think it's going to be a really really crappy division. I think they're going to compete with the NFC South for the worst division, and then compete with the Cardinals for the number 1 pick. So, thank you guys for checking it out. As my son would say, smash that subscribe button. As always, good luck this season.
Cheers.